Is Colorado really considering leaving the Big 12 for the SEC just based on how big the Deion brand is? Maybe. This is Locked On Big 12, Locked On Buffs crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Buffs crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. And that's Kevin Borber of Locked On Buffs, talking all things Colorado. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. If I'm blurry at any point during the show today, it's because Xfinity, Comcast, is out. They're sponsoring my blurry vision today. Borba, we will start with this rumor that is run vaguely rampant across message boards about Colorado jumping from the Big 12 to the SEC alongside Kansas and Nebraska to rebuild some old rivalries from like the Big 8. Also, transfer portal magic, not just Texas Tech or even West Virginia, but Colorado is in there like swimwear. And just because Deion's taken half of what he did last year, I think it's a sign of progress, more so than a sign of an issue for the program. We'll finish with over-under win totals from BYU to Utah to the Buffs to Baylor. Who does Vegas really favor this offseason? If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Borba, the message board gurus are out and about in full force that Colorado is begging. They want to get into the SEC. They think the Deion brand could possibly get them there. If they go with Kansas and Nebraska, they can renew some old rivalries. The one thing, I mentioned this earlier this week, Missouri is arguably a worse pickup than Colorado, especially like right now, Colorado being as big as it is with Dion Sanders. There are Mississippi State. I'd rather be Colorado than Mississippi State. There are a few SEC schools that I think Colorado takes precedent over, and you'd add another time zone. I mean, it's not the craziest thing. Just not sure if Colorado's there.
Yeah, I don't think Colorado's there. I do think if there was like a theory where it was like, okay, pick your favorite conspiracy theory, this would be mine, right? For Colorado, it's like Deion Sanders is so big brand-wise that he could just carry a program to 2 different conferences in 3 years, right? I think he played a big role in Colorado being so desirable to the Big 12. Honestly, I think Colorado in general was desirable in terms of markets, but I don't think having Deion Sanders hurt. And I think it's a fun thought that like, hey, Deion Sanders is so popular, he generates hundreds of millions of dollars for Boulder. What could he do for the SEC, who's constantly on national television, who's constantly in primetime slots? I'm sure the SEC wouldn't oppose, but at the same time, the SEC has turned down Florida State. It's turned down Clemson. They are, ironically, even though they're the ones that kind of helped get this ball rolling of the collapsing of conferences, they're the one conference that has geographical sense, I would say, still, right? Their latest additions still were close in proximity. I don't think adding a time zone to them really matters, right? We'll just put it that way. And I think there's other teams that want to get into the SEC that possibly bring more from a overall perspective than Colorado does, whether it's they're better at more sports, they're better academically, whatever it is. And those guys aren't getting it. I think the SEC is currently an exclusive club, and I don't really know what these 3 schools would bring to the table outside of good vibes and some fun times.
Look, it's a question that goes unsaid. Colorado, if given the invitation tomorrow to the SEC, would say yes. Pretty much any school would, right? You get $20 million more per year. That's good for the administrators. It's not good for the fan base necessarily if you're a Texas A&M type and you can't win or have success in the new conference you move to. But what confuses me here, and this is a loaded question, good luck. Why is the Big Ten so focused on going wall to wall, ocean to ocean? The entire country is in this conference. We have everybody, but the SEC will not do it.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten has to rely or at least knows that it's not the SEC in a way, right? There's a hierarchy in college football where it's the SEC and Big Ten than everyone else. But even within that hierarchy, it's the SEC space, the Big Ten. And I think the Big Ten is trying its best to sort of match or feel like it's equivalent to the SEC in a way, right? Like they went out and made it a point to add USC and UCLA. That gets them the Los Angeles market. They also made it a point to get Oregon and Washington, which West Coast secured, right? And it's like, okay, cool. We're the only conference that goes coast to coast outside of the ACC now because they have 2 schools in the Bay Area. But they really wanted to have all these major brands. And I think the SEC just has bigger brands than the Big Ten in a way, or at least it has in the past. And I think it's really hard for teams to catch up to that. And so the best way to do it is to have a dramatic stretch or dramatic pull, if you will.
That seems, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the Big Ten. Seems as though that's where they're going. And the SEC is just, they're an anchor. They're kind of the anchor of college football. They can just sit at the bottom of the ocean doing what they do, and the ship can't move unless that anchor tells them to. That's where we've come. And ESPN has dropped its anchor right on top. We've doubled up our anchors thanks to
two anchors down.
Which is not good if you're the Big 12 or anybody else. If the SEC, if Greg Sankey woke up tomorrow and said, hey, we do want to expand coast to coast, we want to pick up that mountain time zone next, is Colorado, especially with Deion Sanders at the helm at the top of their board?
If they're going coast to coast, I have to imagine they look at schools like North Carolina, right? I have to imagine that they look at schools like Miami, maybe. I think Florida State and Clemson may have overplayed their hands, and I don't know how desirable they are anymore. But I do think Colorado would probably be, we'll say, in the top 10, right? I think they would probably target more schools in the South because the SEC, in a way, they've kind of like helped kill college football traditions because they like helped get the ball rolling on conference realignment. They have still kept a tradition of being local to each other, right? Like adding Texas and Oklahoma was a big deal in the sense that it took away the Big 12's two biggest brands, but it still made geographical sense, right? They had Texas A&M, right? To kind of match up with them. They had schools like Missouri who are close-ish, Big 12 pass and stuff like that there. So I don't really know where Colorado falls in that because in my head, I just see the SEC as the one geographical conference that still makes sense. And so I don't really know where Colorado falls into that. And I also think it's hard to, speaking of anchors, we'll put it this way. It's hard to put your anchor with Colorado when the biggest question surrounding the program revolves around how long will the head coach be there, right? Because imagine they add Colorado and then Deion Sanders leaves within a year or two. And it's like, okay, was it worth the investment, right? Is Colorado the same program with popularity-wise without Deion Sanders?
Yeah, and that's a big reason I think Clemson has been left off the table. Without Dabo Swinney, what are they? What is Clemson football? I don't know if we have an answer to that because prior to him being there, they kind of sucked hard for like 2 decades, coming off of a national championship in the 90s. Danny Ford, I think, was the head coach of that Clemson team. I love just naming dudes. Coming up, transfer portal magic across the Big 12. Colorado's at the forefront of it, alongside kind of everyone else. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Buffs crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Wayfair. Why is it brought to you by Wayfair? Because, excuse me, I just bought a new house. New to me, right? And I walk in, I'm like, oh, I need a couch, and I need cabinets, and I'm going to need backsplash for the tile thing, and a table, and a Wayfair. Whether you have a balcony, a back porch, a patio, Wayfair. Whatever you need, you're redoing your bathrooms, Wayfair. Comfy conversations, sleek dining tables, outdoor decor. They've got it all. Grab a new patio dining set and some string lights from Wayfair. I love the mix of styles as well. Like, hey, I'm kind of got like a coastal western thing going on in my place out here. All right, Wayfair. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. That's Kevin Borba of Locked On Buffs. Transfer portal buzzing again for Colorado as they've just picked up another wide receiver. That's a position you're going to want to reload a bit on. You did kind of lose arguably the best receiver in the country, who was the number 2 overall draft pick this year. And not only is Colorado soaring, we can start there. Texas Tech, even West Virginia, in the top 10 in the country, according to Rivals. The Big 12 across the board, schools that kind of needed to fill major holes have done that. Colorado is right there in that mix.
Yeah, and I would like to point out Colorado, most wide receivers drafted in college football this year. So best in the country. Wide receiver U, should we get the argument started? I don't know.
Oh,
is it too soon? Is it too soon? One class with 3 people. Is it too soon? I don't know. But they did dip in the portal the past couple of days. They added a 7th offensive lineman in Andre Roy Jr. from Maryland, starter, played over 400 snaps, only allowed 1 sack. And then they brought in Jack Estera, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He was a fun story. He was actually on the Colorado team as a walk-on when Deion Sanders took the job and was one of the guys that was shown the door, ended up at Charlotte, Utah State, and now he's back. And he's got a little bit of experience under his belt. His dad was on the championship team in the 90s for the Buffs, and I think for Colorado, when you lose four, because they also lost a fourth guy, Will Shepard, didn't get drafted, but I do think he'll get an opportunity as an undrafted free agent. When you lose four NFL guys, we'll call it, it's a big deal, right? You lose your starting quarterback, you lose all your receivers. There's a lot of mix and matching that you'll have to figure out, right? And I don't think you're going to replace Travis Hunter with one guy. I don't think you're going to replace Jimmy Horn with one guy. I think you have to moneyball it. And I keep throwing this phrase out on my show because that's the best way to compare it. And Moneyball, if you guys aren't familiar, was a baseball movie about the Oakland A's, currently now the Sacramento Athletics, whatever you want to call them. Disappointment to the Bay Area. Well, we know that for sure. I don't know what you want to call them, but they are a disappointment to the Bay Area. But their whole shtick was replacing expensive star players with a handful of guys who can match their production, right? And Colorado is sort of going to need guys to do that, right? I think they want to have star players emerge, but they also know, like, hey, replacing hundreds of catches and thousands of yards is not easy. And so having guys who could come in and make plays when needed could be a good thing or a solution.
Colorado brought in 50-plus transfers the first 2 years under Deion Sanders. This year, the number sits currently at 28. In my mind, there are some people look at that and they're like, oh, he's changing his ways and the culture's gone and he's no longer going to keep building through the portal. In my mind, there's now enough continuity. There are enough players returning. There's enough production returning that he doesn't have to go get an entire roster or overhaul, 10 position groups. He can just work with the guys he already got out of the portal last season from the high school ranks and fill the holes where they need to be filled. Is that how you view Deion's attack in the portal this year?
Yeah, I think you're hitting it right on the nail. Honestly, they brought in over 100 players first 2 years, right? It was like a whole thing. This first year comes on the campus, literally tells the 2021 team, please leave. Like, literally leave. Like, it's what Drake's former future in-law said to him. Like, that's it. They said, please leave, right? No, I'm just messing with you, Drake. But no, he's
got a great point.
He wanted everyone from that 1-11 team to get the hell out of Dodge, and he wanted to bring in all of these portal guys. And to me, that was never a permanent solution. That was just sort of like hey, this team was historically bad, and I can't imagine there's much I could do with them. And not a lot of them ended up at Power 5 schools. Not a lot of them ended up starting wherever they went. There was a few cases here and there. Jordan Tyson would have been nice to have for the Buffs last year, right? Arizona State star receiver. But yeah, I think he has recruited at a successful level. He's not bringing in 30 recruits per year, but he is bringing in a certain quality of players that could play right away for him. Flipped the guy from Ohio State, brought in a 5-star in Jordan Seaton, right? He is getting players who fit his mold of being able to play right away. And I think, and you hit this earlier, it's easier to fill a need, right? It's like, oh, we lost 3 receivers, we need to bring in 3. Than it is to be like, okay, we lost 70 guys, let's just go out there, because the spring portal is pretty barren, right? There's not, like, outside of Nico Imiala, whatever his name is, Nico, I need money. There wasn't many big name spring portal entries. And so I think he is sort of figuring out his dynamic. When he does bring in transfers, it's guys that have multiple years of eligibility. So it's kind of like a long-term investment, and you kind of have to, or you get to skip the part of like developing them as freshmen.
Yeah. Well, that is a point that I've made so often on my show, and I'll make it a billion times over. Do you want the junior from Western Kentucky with 2 years of eligibility, or the 4-star kid from Aledo High School who is 18? I personally take the 21-year-old who has 300 snaps in college football. That's the guy that I want on my sideline, as opposed to a freshman. And a lot goes into that: culture fit, development, that's a wide array of things can go wrong. But in college football today, you want the kid who has the experience. I personally do. And then from there, hey, we have 2 years to develop him, but he's already been pretty well developed at a different school. Are Colorado fans, how are Colorado fans taking this era? I think we've turned chapters from transfer portal Deion Sanders to ball coach Deion Sanders. Here's a guy who's settled in, he's got what he wants, and now he can start to actually function with consistency. How are Colorado fans approaching that?
I think there's been a weight lifted off their shoulders, Drake, because I think every show I made an appearance on in the past 2 years was It was like, okay, tell us about how exciting this team is around Shedeur and Travis. And then the next question would be, okay, when's Deion leaving? Like, is he leaving for a coaching job? Is he leaving for a TV job, right? And I think him re-signing one of the highest paid coaches in college football, might I add, great investment for those who really understand why it's a great investment. But I think Colorado fans are excited, right? I think that was the biggest question, or like the biggest fear was, does Dion Sanders have a desire to coach outside of his sons, right? That was what got him into coaching. He coached him every step of the way. Shiloh was the only one that didn't play for him initially because he started his career at South Carolina. And so Colorado fans are excited. I think they understand that Dion Sanders knows what he's doing in the portal, right? I've had a few experts come on my show to talk about some of the guys that have entered the portal or have joined Colorado from the portal. They covered them at their previous schools, and the FCS guys they found, like Sincere Brown, the 6'5" Campbell transfer, the wide receiver. A lot of people are excited about him. There's a lot of buzz around him possibly being the best or one of the better receivers in the Big 12, right? They've got Jaheim Otis from Alabama, who was at one point the number one player in the transfer portal. So he knows what he's doing. People are excited that he's signed up for the long term. And now I think the biggest question is just like, what's the next chapter look like without Shedeur and Travis? Although Deion's still here, what is the identity of this team? Can they still compete at the highest level?
I think my biggest question in the immediate would be quarterback play. If Colorado finds in Caden Salter a consistent starting quarterback who goes out and gives them, positive wins above replacement, hello baseball, then you're in good shape. If you find yourself like Utah thinks it was one quarterback away last season, they did have some really good pieces across the board. Yeah. They just didn't have that catalyst at signal caller that could get them there. If that's the boat Colorado falls into this year, that's where things get hairy because the roster is so solid. It's just every play offensively starts with one guy holding on to the football. And if that guy can't get it done, then you're up the creek without the paddle. And that could be Colorado's issue. I don't know if it will be. Deion Sanders seems to be pretty good at the whole quarterback thing. So we'll see how he's able to develop and how he figures out. I mean, there's still a battle, I feel like, going on in Colorado, too. Like, you've got an all-star stud 18-year-old versus Caden Salter, who was really good at Liberty. We'll see how it shakes out. Coming up, over-under on win totals this year. Vegas is smoking something, which is not abnormal. It's just they're smoking something on the Big 12 this time. Kevin Borba of Locked On Buffs. From Brett McMurphy today, the over-under win totals set by Circus Sports Las Vegas for the Big 12. At the top of the conference, tied. 8.5, over-under 8.5 wins for Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech. That is the top tier of the Big 12 per Las Vegas. Here's the craziest part to me. BYU, Kansas, Utah, all tied in that second tier, alongside Baylor and Iowa State. They have Utah and BYU at 7.5 over-under wins this season. Colorado sits right at 6, a fringe bowl team, if you ask Vegas. Houston is at 6.5. They have more faith in Houston this year than Deion Sanders led Colorado, and then everything is rounded out by Arizona, UCF, Oklahoma State, West Virginia down there at the bottom. What stands out to you the most about this? Because, again, my big storyline is BYU and Utah being right there even. That's crazy to me. For you, what stands out?
For me, it's the fact that it's basically they view Colorado as a bowl team or they don't, right? That is the question at hand. It's like, is Colorado a bowl team? That's what we're betting on, right? It's not like, is Colorado going to follow up a 9-win season with a 8-win season? It's like, this team is a fringe bowl team is how Vegas views them. Now, Vegas has been super right on things before, and they've also been super wrong, like Arizona State last year, right? I think everyone and their moms had them as, like, was it 16th team in the conference? And then remind me of how they did. I think they did okay, right?
Yeah, they were okay.
They were okay. They were at least okay, right? They made the playoff, won the Big 12, all that jazz. No, I think Colorado's win total projection is kind of a result of their schedule, right? I'm looking at their stretch from September 27th to November 1st, and I think that's sort of where their season will be made or broke, if you will. They play BYU.
Which is most of the season. You've just given me a very large swath of season.
Yeah, it is. And like that's sort of where I think they'll make or break their season, right? They play BYU, then they go at TCU, then they play Iowa State. So they're playing two of the projected top teams in the Big 12, and then they have to go to Utah on the road, and then Arizona, and then at West Virginia, right? So it's a very tough stretch, and I think Colorado had a stretch like this last year as well, where it looked really challenging at the front end of the season. And then once we got there, it was like, oh, Utah's quarterbacks don't know if they're right-handed or left-handed. Oh, Oklahoma State's running back is driving while busy.
Intoxicated.
Okay,
Yeah.
we went there. But no.
What a DUI is, Borba. It is what the DUI is.
And then to end the season, Drake, they go Arizona State, Kansas State. So they're currently projected to play 4 ranked teams, right? And so this is assuming that all of these teams are as good as they were last year. And if that's the case, all those teams stayed relatively good and Colorado lost a lot of talent. So I think I understand the odds, but it's basically like, do you trust Deion Sanders to get this team to a bowl game is the question here.
What Vegas is telling me about the entire conference with this is Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech being tied at the top, but only at 8.5. They're kind of saying, hey, look, we expect the winner of the Big 12 to be 9-3 this season, which wouldn't be the craziest thing. And then usually, like the SEC, it'll be Georgia over under 11.5 wins, over under 10.5 wins, something an astronomical number because they'll probably win all of the regular season games. But then they'll have over under 2.5 wins for Vanderbilt or Mississippi State. In the Big 12, the worst team in this conference is a win away from bowl eligibility. West Virginia, Oklahoma State, both projected at 5, over under 5 wins in football this season. I think that while the top of the Big 12 doesn't get a ton of love, I think that just shows the depth of this conference that we even think that these schools who were 3-9 last year or replacing a head coach could surprise a lot of people and make a bowl game.
Yeah, I think it shows that the Big 12 from top to bottom is probably the most competitive conference. Right.
I think so.
I don't think that that's a stretch. Right. If you look at the ACC, the top of it is Clemson. The bottom of it is Florida State, Stanford. Right. Florida State, Stanford. Those teams were 3-9, 2-10 last year. I think the bottom of the Big 12 probably beats them. The SEC has always been this way. They just have a superior marketing team known as the 4-letter conglomerate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you may be familiar with them, the 4-letter conglomerate. Drake was actually on the 4-letter conglomerate the other day. Shout out to Drake Toll. But the SEC's bottom half has always been terrible, right? It has always been the top half, the Alabama, the Georgia, the Texas now, LSU that sort of carries the rest of them. Whereas the Big 12, I mean, Drake, we're looking at a world where it's kind of, I don't know if it's mathematically possible, but there's going to be well over half these teams that could be playing for a bowl game. Possibly all the teams, if it's mathematically possible. I guess they could all go 6-6, right?
Yeah, I would hate that.
I will. Yes, that would be terrible. That would be terrible for all things Big 12. But I do think the Big 12 doesn't get the credit it deserves for being a deep conference. But at the same time, I think that's sort of what hurts it at times, right? That's where it's like we need a dominant team.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Okay.
Because yes for the Big 12, but then you make the case the SEC is so top heavy and, you know, they've got a really good thing going for them when it comes to the top 2 or 3 teams just winning all the games they're supposed to win. Then last season, Ole Miss loses to Kentucky. Alabama loses to Vanderbilt. You're starting to see these Tennessee loses to Arkansas. These top end SEC schools lose to middle or bottom of the pack squads in their own league. So I'm curious. You didn't see it as much in the Big Ten, but I'm curious to know if college football, because of the parity that's here, because of the transfer portal and NIL, what that's created, if we're going to start seeing more of an NFL-like format of upsets, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility that one weekend the Dolphins beat the Bills in Miami. You're like, the Dolphins weren't very good and the Bills are elite. Yeah, but it's the NFL. It's just kind of the way it goes. Hey, the Browns snuck up on somebody this week because that's the way the NFL goes. I believe we're starting to see that in college football with the amount of upsets that we got last season, just because the talent field is leveling out a ton. And man, I'm on a soapbox now. What I mean by that is used to Western Kentucky, I'll bring them up again, had 5 players that could probably start in the SEC. Only 5, so it meant they weren't a very good football team in the grand scheme of things, but they had 5 guys that could go in the transfer portal, but it was just tough to transfer. You had to sit out a year. Today, now those 5 guys are on SEC rosters. So now that the playing field at the top is so even that Arkansas isn't near as far away from Alabama as they were 10 years ago. Same is true for, I think, every major conference in college football. And you're going to start seeing less success out of Boise State, Western Kentucky for that reason. But with that, I'm hopeful. Hope is a fickle thing in It's
So
terrible. I'm hopeful that the College Football Playoff Committee will recognize that and see that the Big 12, just because it has a lot of parity, doesn't mean it's a bad league. It's just how we're looking at college football in the modern era, you know?
Yeah, I think when it comes to College Football Playoff Committee, it's like, are they going to start valuing the hypothetical games again? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I do think there's a reason that there's such a push for playoff expansion. I think there's a reason that there's a push for automatic bids, is because all of these programs across the country, all of these athletic directors are seeing exactly what you're seeing, Drake, which is things are balancing out. Nick Saban himself, I think he left college football, who's not, what is he, like the czar of college football, the dictator?
He's the Pope. He's the Pope.
There was white smoke, and it was Nick Saban who was picked. But he himself was not able to retain his roster because guys don't want to wait anymore. So there's a lot of movement and the talent distribution. Like, those schools are still getting top guys, but they're not getting them and keeping them, right? They're losing them. Like, Alabama lost a 5-star, 4-star wide receiver to Ole Miss, right? They lost, I think they lost like 4 wide receivers in the transfer portal, right? They lost a ton. And so there's guys like that who it's like, we want to play elsewhere, but we still want to play at big programs. And so the writing is on the wall that college football is more competitive and possibly as deep as it's ever been. And I think that's why there's such a push for expansion, automatic bids. And I think that's why these SEC and Big Ten conferences are trying to throw their brands on the table and be like, hey, we're the biggest brands. We should get the most bids. It's because they recognize, like, hey, our top teams are not beating the living you-know-what out of our bottom teams anymore. Like, Kentucky beat Ole Miss, right? Arkansas, like you mentioned, beat Tennessee, and that was a playoff team. And, like, I think it scares teams to not have assurance that, like, hey, just because everyone's good now doesn't mean, like, we still don't deserve that special treatment, right?
Yeah. Well, college football today. That seems to be how every conversation ends. It's just like, well, I guess we're screwed.
133 team playoff. Who says no?
Mike Leach says yes. In his honor, we'll call it the Mike Leach Invitational, and we'll play it every year instead of this BS where they're going to go 16 teams and 4 bids, and you play a tournament in your conference to see who's going to go to. It's all so messed up. Kevin Borba, where can folks find more of your work?
Yeah, you can find me over at Athlon Sports, covering all things college football, NBA, WNBA, as the season kicks off. And then, of course, over at Locked On Buffs, I'm covering Deion Sanders and the Buffaloes every single day as we try to navigate the new era of Coach Prime.
Yeah, you can hit subscribe, and that would be cool. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Buffs and Dose Grande.